Alright, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Rock and Roll Aristocracy. Today, as I said for anyone who watched my update video earlier, this video is going to be on the REM album Murmur, which was its debut back on the 12th of April, 83. So let's get into the discussion. The album title, as I said, is Murmur by the band REM, released on the 12th of April, 1983 through the IRS label. The album clocks in at 44 minutes and 11 seconds, and it was recorded in Reflection Studios in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I found on various sources, I originally found on Wikipedia and confirmed through other sources that Reflection Studios, as of the 20th of May 2014, is now defunct. So even though it is gone, I guess it has a claim to fame that it released or it helped record an album that kind of started a movement. As I've said, pardon me, the album producers for this album were Don Dixon and Mitch Easter. And as I've said about this album, it's a debut, and it's funny because the Boston debut I did on Wednesday, so I'm kind of hitting a trend with debuts. And even though I didn't with the Fleetwood Mac album, but this Murmur album, to me, it started a movement, and I'll get into that in a few seconds. First, let's talk about the singles. I have to say, I'm a little disappointed with this album, how the singles turned out. First, we have Radio Free Europe, which was released 8th of June, 1983. And we have Talk About the Passion, was the second and last single, which was released sometime in November 83. I couldn't find any sources that could corroborate a day it was released. A few notes about this album. It actually reached number 36 on the US Billboard 200 and number 100 on the UK albums chart, except for the fact that when it released, or when it debuted on the UK album chart, it was in 1994, which was 11 years after its initial release. Neither of the singles that I mentioned earlier charted well. In fact, Talk About the Passion failed to even chart, and Radio Free Europe peaked at 25. Upon second thought, the one who wrote that they didn't chart well, 25 is not bad. I have a bias against, maybe not against the singles, but I have a bias towards other songs on this album. So in hindsight, I think the singles they chose were a little bit lacking, but that's just me. What I hope to be known for on this channel is wild speculation that has no corroboration and just my own thoughts, because we can parrot all of the details and the statistics and the actual facts of the album, and that's fine. But if we all did that, that would make for no differentiation, and all the videos would be boring. So, wild speculation is what I'm going to call it. You can call it whatever you want. Personal thoughts. I like wild speculation because I think a lot of my thoughts are wild speculation that will never come to fruition because we don't know, we weren't there. So, my wild speculation for this album is that, yes, REM were among the first alternative rock bands, along with the likes of the Violent Femmes and 10,000 Maniacs. I'm suggesting that had this album been released either 5 years earlier or 5 years later, so 1978 or 1988, that the album would have hit a lot better than I think it did, which, in fairness, it hit well because it started a movement that people enjoyed the band, enjoyed this album. It's a great album. And it later spawned albums like Green and Out of Time, which in my opinion, are much more well known and might not be as deserving of the recognition as this album because it's great. Um, Nothing against Green or Out of Time, especially not Green because that is actually one of that's my second favorite REM album, which I might get to if you guys want to see. I think that this, since it was a debut and it helped, it was at the forefront of the alternative rock scene. I think it really helped propel this band forward, and it kind of just it's disheartening to see that the two singles that were released didn't do anything, and it makes me wonder what the album could have done in its first 10 years had a song like Laughing been one of the singles. The wild speculation over. Let's get into the song rankings. Number 12. Oh, yes, before. I mean, as you can already see, there are 12 songs on this album. It's a decently long album. Number 12. Last place. Again, I have to reiterate because some people might think that I dislike this song or I dislike a song that comes in last place on the album. It just so happens that in a ranking, there has to be a last place. I do like all of these songs to varying degrees. There are a few songs that I definitely would categorize above the rest of the album in terms of quality, like anyone else, but all these songs are great. I'm just a fan of music. So, without, any further ado, number 12, Radio Free Europe. Now, I'll admit, I don't have any experience with the actual Radio Free Europe, being born post Cold War in America. It's not anything that I knew about. I mean, I knew the song and I knew that that existed, but maybe that's why this song doesn't hit as well for me. Um, I don't really have any idea what this song is about. The only discernible line that I can personally make sense of is, quote, besides defying media too fast, instead of pushing palaces to fall. And that to me suggests that the listeners of Radio Free Europe should have had the awareness that the media holds the power in the countries, and those who seize control of the media without destroying the history and relevance of the places that they live in are going to be the ones who make the most change. And I think that's relevant in any situation. I have very subversive ideas with things like media and how the media does shape the context of the society. And I think those who control the media control the world. Maybe that's not as subversive as I originally thought, but I'm just speaking. I'm giving you my personal thoughts. Number 11, the song Pilgrimage. I had trouble with this song because it seems to be discussing religion in a positive way, but also in a satirical way, and I'm not sure which is the case. And I think music is art, and art is up for interpretation, so unless there are actual historical references in songs, or historical references that are the focus of a song, I think up to interpretation is definitely the case. But the lyrics that I've actually identified with in this song, the fact that someone's, quote, luck with pilgrimage will not last, it's like, it seems to be suggesting to me that certain demonstrations of faith might have an impact on you or an impact on those around you for the time, but they won't last. It seems to suggest to me that we follow what we believe, that we should, quote, take a turn, take off marching. That's the two sides that I got to this song where I don't know what the actual message is, because on the one hand, the first lyric I gave sounds like, oh yes, faith is whatever, it's not really going to last. But then the end of the song, which just repeats, take a turn, take off marching, it almost sounds like a call to action. Like, go for what you believe in. Have faith. Who cares about the people who are criticizing you? Just go and do. So maybe the song means both things, and maybe that's what it's supposed to mean. Who knows? I got the impression that it means both. Number 10, We Walk. This is far and away the least lyrically complex song on the album. It has less than 30 words, I believe, in the song. 30 separate words, I mean. Um, Saying that this is the least complex song is really saying something, because this album has nonsense lyrics. I mean, in several interviews about this album, the lead singer Michael Stipe has said he just said sounds and in the recordings, and would sing around those sounds in concert, whatever came to mind, which just is mind-boggling that someone could do that. So maybe the lyrical interpretation and examination that I've been doing the first two albums won't work here. That being said, I already did this script, and I'm trying to read it and give you a deeper insight than what I wrote. Uh, and I didn't come to the conclusion that maybe lyrics aren't important here until just now. So we're gonna soldier on. In We Walk, there's an image of a reference that says, quote, Marat's bathing, and that references the assassination of the French Jacobin leader Jean-Paul Marat, who was on the side of the revolutionaries and Maximilien Robespierre in the Reign of Terror. Um, there's a painting of the bathing of Marat where he's in his tub and he's sprawled out, and I believe that is the source of inspiration for this song, or at least that reference in this song. To me, it seems like this song, the image of referencing art and philosophy, it becomes a theme in alternative music to do such. And so it's cool to see that this is one of the first alternative albums, and that's this is like essentially the godfather of these imageries. Um, Number 9, Shaking Through. This song, as I talked about with We Walk, this song has no clear cut meaning. And again, I'll say it. I think this song is indicative of just the entire album and much of REM's original, like early stuff. There's not one specific meaning. It's just defining sounds and putting words around them. It's a good song, and that I didn't mean it to come off as like flat as that was, but it's a good song. I just think it's overshadowed by a lot of other songs on the album. Uh, the the line that got to me most for this song was actually the line that opens it. Quote, could it be that one small voice doesn't count in the room? People like to champion the idea of individuality, and I'm definitely one of those people. But this song kind of subverts that idea just in one sentence. Perhaps we don't have as powerful a voice as we tend to think. But I don't think that's a cynical idea. I tend to picture it as more of a reason to pursue and find out. Like, maybe, maybe we don't have a voice. Could it be that one small voice doesn't count in the room? It's not saying it doesn't, it's just saying find out for yourself. And I like that image. Number 8 is talk about the passion. And you'll notice that we're halfway through, not even halfway through this album, and I'm going in reverse order, and I've already hit both of the singles, which just tells you how lowly I think about the singles. It it seems like a complete missed opportunity to not put other songs as the singles, but I digress. This song, Talk About the Passion, is essentially a protest song. It suggests that they are speaking out against hunger. There's a French phrase that Michael Stipe repeats in the song, and forgive me because I don't speak French, combien de temps, which means how much time or for how long, as in how long will people be going hungry. Another quote in the song, not everyone can carry the weight of the world. That's my favorite line in this song, and one of my favorite lines in the entire album. It's not everyone can carry the weight of the world. It kind of suggests the same thing that I just spoke about on Shaking Through. Could it be that one small voice doesn't count in the room? It's not saying it doesn't. It's not saying that no one can carry the weight of the world. Perhaps it's meaning that we have to do it together, and doing it by ourselves isn't enough. And thinking back to the fact that this is about world hunger, ostensibly, no one can do that alone. No one can combat any macro world scale malady just by themselves, no matter how important or rich or successful they are. We have to do it together. The song, I mean, this album can be cynical. This album is cynical, but it sounds fun. It's like inviting, and this song is really not. It makes you think, and it doesn't match the tone of the rest of this album to me, and that's why it's so low. Moving on to number 7. Number 7, West of the Fields. Okay, so I was listening to this song last night. Because that's what I've been doing for these albums. Yes, I've listened to them several times before. In the case of these first 3 albums, I've listened to them several dozen times before. But I wanted to get the image of all these songs fresh in my mind for this video, and my mind just sorting through all these songs, and especially talking about the first 5 that I have that just seem like sounds that point towards a message but don't actually give you one. This song has a message, and it's like clear. It's not beat you over the head. It's like, hey, this might be it, and it's way more clear than any of the other songs on this album. I I read that the the title and much of the composition of the song comes from Greek mythology. It makes sense because alternative, as I said earlier, alternative music likes to talk about mythology and history and social things that references that most other types of music don't make. So think I can see the connection there now. I mean, it's a great song. The Fields of Elysium, which I believe is what they are talking about in the context of Greek mythology, for anyone who doesn't know, were the metaphorical representation of the afterlife. It was the the contrast to Hades. Like uh, the Fields of Elysium are only open to those mortals who were related to gods and those who weren't exactly related to the gods but were chosen by them. So it's not just the senseless, angry void that the masses get sent into. It's like the exalted place. And their souls would remain there eternally, such as the case for Hades, but theoretically, the those who get the chance to stay in Elysium would be much more happy for eternity. I, Listening to the song and knowing the title, the repetition of the phrase "west of the fields" gets kind of jumbled. So I didn't know what he was saying for the longest time. I heard fields, and I think it's knowing what I know or doing the research I did about Elysium. It seems to be like the the title of the song is misinformed because Elysium was actually the fields of Elysium were actually west of the mortal plane. So I guess in the cardinality of things, west of the fields would be nothing. And I don't know if that's the image that they were going for. If anyone has any relevant information on this song, please let me know because I enjoy this song, and I'm a Greek mythology nerd, so I enjoy that much. I enjoy that even more than this song, which says something. So let me know, please. Okay, number 6, sitting still. Which, if you're watching the video, you notice that I can't do. Sorry if you have sickness. Just turn off the video, like motion sickness. Just turn off the video. Listen to my voice, because I cannot sit still. Um, I did some research on this song, and it seems to be about deafness. And I don't know if that's the biological definition of deafness, as in we can't hear. There's a lack of connection from the ear to the brain, or if it's in the metaphorical, philosophical sense of we are deaf to things that we don't care about. The title "Sitting Still" seems to me to be a reference towards a common desire for anyone who cares for children, like babysits them or whatever. They want them to sit still because then they can keep them under control. Uh, it makes sense. Of the lyrics, there's not any single theme that is provided, which I'm repeating, I know, but I had to. I wrote this script, which I'm largely reading off of. I mean, I'm giving you off the cuff interpretations along with it, but largely I am reading off of this script, and I have to say, I'm writing this script for myself. Like, knowing that there's not one single theme in this song, it just goes off of like that's the entire album. There's not one. Some of these songs don't even have lyrics. Like I mean, they do, but as I said earlier, they're just sounds. It's like it's not even a real story. It's just words. So this song doesn't really have a clear message other than sitting still, but there is a passage that contains the only decipherable lyrics, and I say only decipherable because Stipe himself has actually said that they reference his sister. She herself is deaf, and she instructs deaf children, or had at the time of the recording of this song. The lyric that tells me that the song might be about something more than literal blindness is the following: I can hear you, can you hear me? Correct me if I'm wrong, but if the phrase was directed at a deaf child, the answer, if an answer was given at all, would be no. So it's like, I don't think this is about literal blindness. I mean, deafness, pardon me. I think it's more about metaphorical deafness. We're not paying attention, which is ironic, considering I just slipped up there. I like this song. I just like REM. They can sing nothing, and in most cases they do sing nothing, and I just enjoy the songs. Okay, we're getting into the top five now. Number five is Catapult. My interpretation of this song is it's a look into the life of a child growing up around the time that Stipe did in the 60s and or 70s. The phrase, quote, did we miss anything, could be a reference to the childlike state of asking way too many questions that are, on the surface, unnecessary. Spend any time around kids and you'll hear the question why more often than you ever thought you'd want it to. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just putting that out there. There's another quote in this song. Your mother remembers this. Hear the howl of the rope. I don't know about you, but that kind of suggests a really dark idea about a child being punished severely for doing something that went against the wishes of who I assume to be the father, based on the phrasing of the lyric, referencing the mother and you in some way. Uh, it's a very cynical song. It's definitely not an enjoyable song in the sense of just put it on and let the song fill you with some happy thing. It's more enjoyable in the sense that it tells a story, regardless of it being true. I mean, it could be true in a very generic sense. Uh, yeah, I like the song. I also like cynical things, so that that kind of sums that up. Number four, Perfect Circle, which I have to say, I read this and I got vibes of a later band, which some of you will know. This song, Perfect Circle, seems to suggest a person trying to fit into situations that they quite obviously don't fit into. The repetition of the phrase, quote, standing too soon, shoulders high in the room, suggests to me someone wanting to leave a situation but not being able to find a way out, either physically with the shoulders blocking the view of the exit, or metaphorically not finding a way out of a conversation, not wanting to be seen as rude for ending conversation. The lyric, 11 shadows way out of place. See, okay, I'm a sports fan, and so when I hear the phrase 11 shadows, I just think of dead football players. Football, as in American football, or I guess football as in the world sense, because they both do have 11 to a side. Um, yes, they do. I had to make sure. Yes. And according to various sources, this comes from a time when the band were staying at a motel in between gigs, and the drummer Bill Berry noticed a group of kids playing touch football. So I don't know if that's true, or if he and I just had the same idea of 11, and that just gives you football vibes, especially if you're in America. Um, this lyric suggested they had no idea what they were doing. The kids that were playing the touch football, just 11 shadows way out of place. 11 people in the darkness just playing to have fun and not playing to, silence any critics. Uh, Even if this album is made of nonsense lines, it conjures up some fantastic images, and this is definitely one of them. Uh, As I've said, I like all these songs. I wouldn't be doing albums that I didn't like all the songs, or at least respect all of the songs. That being said, this one is definitely up there for my personal opinion. It is a cool song, and we're getting into the top three. Uh, any of you who know this album and were paying attention at the beginning of this video probably know what is going to be the top song on this list, and I'm sure you also know what number two and three are. I don't know why. I don't need to know why, do I? Songs just. This is that's the cool thing about music. Songs don't need to have a reason why they interest you, why they attract you. They just need to do so, and you need to let them. Number three, Moral Kiosk. On top of killer music that riffs, pun intended, on the punk foundations, there's another reason for me to praise this band that I talked about earlier. References to Greek mythology. Stipe could be referencing nonsense here. I wrote this in reverse order, so yes, he definitely is referencing nonsense here. Uh, and it still sounds philosophical and cool. And like, I remember reading an article, and the interviewer asked Stipe, "So there is no moral kiosk?" And Stipe laughed and said, "No, I don't believe so. Maybe not physically. It's it's the fault of my own brain, and the fault of creating this channel in the way that I did to want to dissect lyrics, and like point out things that I think are references to something greater when all these songs are nonsensical. Uh, you know, you're listening. I'm talking about this, and some of you are watching and are still here. So apparently, you guys like it, and I'm glad because I enjoy talking about this. As you can tell, this has gone on for 33 minutes now. Um, this song, Moral Kiosk, seems to me to suggest that a person's choices, so long as they don't negatively affect anyone, shouldn't be up to scrutiny. Quote, it's so much more attractive inside the moral kiosk. That suggests to me that people tend to knock things before they would, even think to try them. And think of all the various groups who pander to the ultra conservatives. I'm not going to name names. I don't want to get into that type of argument or discussion which would lead to an argument. I don't want to do that. But think about those types of groups by suggesting that anything that provides any sensory stimulation is considered evil. When you're unaware of the potential benefits, potential, meaning they could be there, they could be very small, even if they are, you're more inclined to speak up against the risks because it just looks like something bad, something immoral. Going back to the actual song, it's so much more attractive inside the moral kiosk where you have the high ground. If someone quotes the prequels, I am going to go insane. Do not. But inside the moral kiosk, you've got the high ground, even if it's just off of your own opinion, your own belief. I don't think there's such thing as moral high ground because we're all so different. There's 8 billion of us, and we all have things that we hold in higher regards. And this song just seems to go, hey, let people be people. If it's not hurting you or anyone else, let it be. Number two, 9-9. I heard this song. I've been listening to this song for a while now. It's one of my favorite songs. It's definitely high on my top 500 list, which will be coming out soon. And if I don't think about the lyrics, it's a fun song that has some really awesome bass lines. I gotta, yeah, that the bass in the song is fantastic. But if I do think about the lyrics, they're very suggestive, and this is where the idea of Stipe wrote the lyrics just to be nonsense kind of falls apart because they are too specific to be nonsensical. I'm going to give you an example. Twisting tongues, got a stripe, down his back, all 9 yards down her back. I might be misinterpreting that, and I don't want to say that I wish I am, uh, but it definitely gives me an image that's very specific, and it doesn't seem to be that that was just an accident. It would be fantastic if I could get Michael Stipe himself to tell me that, like, oh yeah, you're on the right track, or no, you're totally crazy. But that won't happen. Apart from that interpretation, another could be the inability to communicate properly. For example, don't give me a couple of pointers, turn to lies and conversation, and eventually conversation fear. It may not be our desire to deceive someone that helps us turn to lies and just idle conversation. It might be the fact that we are afraid of bearing ourselves. Uh, we might not even have the words to connect on the deeper level. We might just feel, and that's it. And so we bury the feeling under, lies and conversation. But as I'm sitting here, that seems too deep for the admittedly nonsensical album that is Murmur. Whatever the meaning, though, this is one of my favorite songs in REM's discography, let alone this album. And we've come to number one. The song is Laughing. Now, I heard this song just a couple of weeks after being in a class that talked about the sculpture of Laocoon and his two sons fighting the serpents. And maybe that's the reason I like this song so much, because I knew the context before hearing the song. And I do like the way he says Laocoon in the song. Um, and the fact that he references Laocoon and her two sons rather than his. I think that's an interesting subversion of the actual story. But for those who don't know, Laocoon was a Trojan prophet in ancient Greek times who attempted to warn the Trojans of the impending Greek attack. Uh, Athena, who was the matron goddess of Athens and protector of the Greek armies during these Trojan wars, was said to have sent giant sea serpents to kill Laocoon and his two sons. The quote, I love this quote, I fear the Greeks, even bearing gifts, that is attributed to Laocoon himself. Sitting here 2,500 years after that happened, the Trojan War, I feel like that's a little too perfect and a little too prophetic. Um, but the song to me suggests being aware of the fact that good intentions might be a ruse and to never waver in favor of the popular view. Always feel what you feel, regardless of the outcome. It could be that they are just giving you a gift. It could be that they have, soldiers hidden in their Trojan horse and they are trying to attack your city. It's better to be safe than sorry. Uh, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I had fun. I always have fun talking about these things. Next album I'm gonna do, I'm actually doing a Patreon. I'm gonna put the Patreon in the description of this video. I have a Patreon, and I'm gonna put album reviews that are from bands that tend to get their stuff blocked. You know, I won't name names because just in case I say the name and I get blocked off of a totally unrelated album or unrelated video. But for people who know anything about classic rock history, today's the 8th of November. Um, so 48 years ago today, there was an album that was released that eventually became very popular and never actually hit number one in the US, even though it was very popular. Some of you will know, and that's the album that I'm going to be doing for my Patreon. I'm going to put that up sometime this weekend. Um, but thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.